It's Monday night, and you know what that means. Jersey First brings to you the latest edition of Real Talk, and I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, top 100 Latino via the Latino Spirit Online magazine for 2020, 2021, and now in 2022. And your favorite conservative. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's me, Fernando Uribe. Hoping you all had a wonderful Easter weekend. Shout out to my mom yesterday, celebrating another year of life. A great surprise birthday party for her this past Saturday at Rumba Cubana, one of the better Cuban restaurants in North Jersey, located along JFK Boulevard East in the small little township of Guttenberg, New Jersey. Great to surprise mom, and just so grateful to have her again for another year of life as we celebrate it. And a special thank you to everyone involved, my dad, my immediate family, certainly, and all our great guests who were able to show up and celebrate with my mom. And folks, again, after what we've been through for the last 2 years, when we can celebrate our birthday with friends and family, let's do it. Let's go all out. Let's maximize it as much as we can. Because obviously, because of COVID, we weren't able to celebrate a lot of birthdays. So you know what? Be grateful, be gracious, and again, just be thankful that we're able to do this again as the weather's getting warmer. And so a shout out again, a little shout out to everybody coming out this Saturday. And certainly for many more birthdays that are ahead of us. So, folks, again, I want to thank you all for tuning in from wherever and however you're doing so here tonight on Facebook Live and also on the Jersey First YouTube page. Tonight is one of those rare occasions. There is a double main event this evening, so I'm very excited. There's also a great closing segment at the end of the show. I'm going to just give my thoughts on a specific journalist in New Jersey that still kind of irritates me. But if it wasn't enough to roast him last week, it's going to be a pleasure to roast him again this week. But again, folks, let's start off with our double main event. And you know what? Folks, if you're looking to read a book that is informative, that is illustrative, and that is most importantly, really instrumental in helping you seek recovery, if that is where you are in life, whether it's from substance abuse, any sort of disorder, folks, I recommend Discovery of Recovery, available on Amazon, also on Kindle, very, very affordable. And it's an easy read, and it's a very enjoyable read. Tonight, I speak with the author, Ann Real, as she joins us here tonight on Real Talk. Ann, how are you? Welcome.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much. And I'm very delighted to be here tonight on Real Talk with Fernando Uribe.
Oh, I appreciate that. And listen, I wish I was down in Miami where you're at right now because it's like 49 and cloudy, but I think it's like 80 degrees by you, right, Ann?
Yes, it's beautiful weather.
All right. Well, you know what? I'll have to make my way down there and make sure that I get this copy autographed by you down maybe when I visit Miami soon. So we'll have to do that as well. But Ann, one of the most interesting things about your book is how transparent you are about your own recovery from not just substance abuse and other disorders. Take our audience through sort of the process as it pertains to writing this book. And at the end of the day, really what you discovered during this process.
Okay, so I have to give a little bit introduction about my recovery. I'm in recovery from the eating disorder and addiction for almost 7 years. And of course, talking about recovery is not complete without talking about disease. So I am in recovery from eating disorder, addiction, and then drugs and smoking. And I spent most of my life being emotionally numb. My mind was completely preoccupied by weight, body, smoking, alcohol, and there was no place for anything else. So recovery for me was reclaiming my life and starting a brand new life all over again. I needed to face the fact that my life in addiction that I created, I couldn't tolerate sober. So I had to create a life that I would enjoy as a sober woman that I don't want to run away from. And that's what is my book about. It's about how to build a life that keeps you naturally high, that you don't need to find escape from.
Well, and I mean, one of the things that really struck me about the book again is how transparent you were in it and how honest you were, which I think is very important for any reader to see how the author is communicating his or her message again to the audience. And I have to ask, I mean, you're not originally from South Florida. I mean, I believe you grew up in Los Angeles, right? You're from Ukraine. So again, my thoughts and prayers are with you and members of your family that are dealing with this just horrendous situation going on right now in your homeland. You grew up in Los Angeles, right? I mean, and that's sort of, again, not the stereotype, but Los Angeles probably is not the healthiest city to live in the United States. It's very cosmopolitan. It can be very glamorous, but it can also be very toxic. Is that fair to say?
I grew up in Ukraine, actually, and interestingly enough, the first 2 years of my sobriety were in Los Angeles. And for me, it was a very different experience. I found a great spiritual community, Kundalini community, 12-step program community is very big in Los Angeles. And I found a lot of supportive people that helped me a lot through my recovery in that city.
Well, again, it's something that is admirable because, listen, sobriety is still a concept that so many millions of Americans struggle with every single year. Never mind globally, it still remains a serious problem. But here in the United States, and despite the amount of resources that we have put into substance abuse awareness, eating disorders, as you mentioned, anorexia, bulimia, even gambling. I mean, that's a disorder too. I mean, people may not want to look at it the same way, but it's still, an addiction. And it's amazing how much we put into programs, resources, starting, even as young as elementary school, when it comes to these issues. And still so many Americans grow up and grow into a lot of these different disorders and addictions. As you were writing this book, I'm sure you were doing your own research, looking at data, looking at statistics. What stood out for you as probably the most disturbing element about addiction right now in the United States?
It's a great question. Honestly, I think in many cases, people treating addictions don't have the full understanding of the disease process, which is a little bit frustrating for me. I see that a lot of people find help in 12-step groups because, again, those groups are designed in such a way that recovered individual helps somebody to recover. Obviously, if you go through this path, you gain an understanding of the disease process, even without a medical education. But unfortunately, there's so much stigma around this disease. Addicted person gets blamed for every single thing possible. And on top of dealing with a hardcore, life-changing, dangerous disease, they also have to break through a lot of stigma on their way to recovery. And I'm noticing that, and that's very frustrating for me.
No, it certainly can be. And folks, if you're just joining us right now, it's 6:08 here on the East Coast. Joining me tonight here in the first half of tonight's double main event, she is an acclaimed author. And listen, if you folks want to check out a wonderful book, check out Discovery of Recovery. It's available on Amazon and Kindle. Very affordable. It's a wonderful read. And the book's author, Ann Real, joins us here tonight on Real Talk. And let me just go into some pages here. Something as Dr. Uribe does his homework for every week. I like to make sure that the good professor is prepared. And early on in the book, I mean, I'm just looking here at page 33, and there was a really interesting statement here. It reads as follows: "You will have to face your feelings." And you quoted Dr. Gabor Mate. When we flee our vulnerability, we lose the full capacity for feeling emotions. We may even become emotional amnesiacs, not remembering ever having felt truly elated or truly sad. From people that I talk to that are struggling with sobriety, that are dealing with addiction issues. I mean, I talk to so many people along my age demographic, a little bit younger, a little bit older, that are still struggling. I mean, especially here where I live in New Jersey, I walk 2 blocks and I look at Manhattan, right? The greatest city in the world, but it's not without its fair share of issues. It's a very high pressure city. It's a high pressure region. And I still see so many adults, men and women, struggling with, again, everything from substance abuse to your point about eating disorders. I would argue I think you hit the nail on the head early on in the book. You have to face your feelings. You have to face what's wrong and not be in denial. But that's not easy for everyone, right?
Obviously, yes. The problem is that any mind-altering substance, especially drugs, but also behaviors, mind-altering behaviors, they numb our ability to feel. It's like stepping on the nail, having it in your foot, but instead of really taking care of the problem, right? Going through surgery and things like that, we're just taking pills and keep walking like that never happened. But the problem is that if we have emotional pain, just like physical pain, it signifies that we have a problem somewhere. And when we take the drugs, we are able to ignore the problem for a very, very long time. So when it comes to recovery, usually people face the problems that are so long ago, that happened so long ago, that by the time that they faced it, they became really, really bad. It's like if you ignore a nail in your foot for a year, you're not just having a nail in your foot at this time. You can have a sepsis infection around your entire body. The infection can penetrate the bone, and sometimes the full recovery is not even possible anymore. And that's what happened with addiction. When we medicate our feelings for a very, very prolonged period of time, therefore ignoring the problems that create the feelings, sometimes getting sober is very, very challenging, because we have to face not just the problems that we've been denying, but also the effect of denial, meaning how we made the problems worse by simply denying them.
Again, you're very transparent in the writing of the book. Certainly, you detail your journey to sobriety, and again, getting back to a sense of normalcy for you, getting back to a sense of functionality. And that's not easy. Again, folks, I mean, Anne's not just an author. She's also a psychiatric registered nurse. So she's been able to look at these disorders and these addictions from not just, let's say, a literary perspective, but also a clinical one as well, in her capacity as a psychiatric RN. And let me ask you this, and again, I don't want to get too personal again, but I think it's important for our audience to sort of understand, not to sort of rank them from easiest to most difficult, because I think it's fair to say that overcoming any sort of addiction and disorder is challenging. So I really don't want to put a sort of, a number grade on it per se, like 1 being, the least difficult, 10 being the most. But when you talk about substance abuse, you talk about eating disorders, what did you find to be probably easier to overcome, in your journey? I mean, I'm sure they're all difficult, of course. I don't want to minimize one over the other, but where would you say that one took a little bit longer to achieve and sustain?
It's a great question, actually. And I can definitely say in my experience what was the most challenging. However, for different people, it's going to be different. In my case, definitely eating disorder was the one that was the most challenging to overcome. When it comes to alcoholism and prescription pills that I've been taking, that was a little bit easier. And when it comes to smoking, thank God gave me pneumonia, which helped me overcome it as well. So definitely eating disorder would be the hardest thing to overcome in my journey.
Now, when we talk about we'll get back to the eating disorder in a moment, but when we talk about substance abuse, I mean, again, it can range from anything from alcohol to illegal narcotics to prescription drugs. I would make this case, and again, before I entered into academia, I worked in the criminal justice system here in New Jersey for 10 years, and I saw with my own eyes that while, yes, illegal substances like marijuana, not anymore in New Jersey and in other parts of the country, but for a very long time, everything from marijuana to cocaine to heroin. I mean, obviously, they're still illegal in many states. I mean, those are the ones that, for the most part, law enforcement focuses in on. But what I would argue is, and the data has shown that in the last 10 years or so, prescription drugs, I would say, have leapfrogged over these illegal substances because they seem to be a little easier to obtain. I mean, listen, You want to go cocaine or heroin, you're going to have to make that fateful decision to go to a street corner, go to the sort of the underworld, the black market of narcotics and drug abuse. That's not the case with prescription drugs. You have a family member or a friend who has access to this sort of medication. This can be catastrophic for people, and it is killing millions of Americans every single year. Have you seen the same data?
Yes, definitely. In recovery centers, I see very often a person who came after surgery, they were prescribed oxycodone, for example, and then they just become addicted, and 2 years later, they are buying heroin because they cannot stop using drugs. And these are just one story, but recovery facilities are full of the people going through this, or benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines get you very addicted. And I had so many patients who were prescribed benzodiazepines, but then the addiction goes so bad that they start taking them off the streets and they end up in a recovery home.
And certainly, listen, we've talked about, here today about sort of the overlaying problem that still exists in the United States when it comes to drug abuse, but more so, again, prescription drugs. And this is something that I always have these debates when it comes to talking about criminal justice reform, again, whether it be discussing it academically or professionally. It's really funny what, the U.S. government has spent billions of dollars on for over 30 years, if not almost 40 years, in combating illegal drugs. And we're nowhere closer to ending substance abuse. We're nowhere closer to ending drug abuse in this country than we were, 40 some years ago, right?
Yeah.
Under President Reagan, who talked about say no to drugs, just say no. And despite how much curriculum there are in our public schools when it comes to substance abuse and eating disorders, for example, or other disorders overall, it still remains a serious problem, not just for adults, but now it's trickling down into our high schools and elementary schools, because I would argue that when it comes to, for example, to eating disorders, and, here in the United States, we live in such a cosmopolitan, optic-driven society. And certainly the internet and obviously social media has not helped this, right? It has engaged in body shaming. It has made people sort of believe like this is the shape that you need to be in to be considered handsome, beautiful, or whatever. Listen, I'm in my 40s. I have one ab. The other 5, I don't know if I'll ever find them. I'm trying to eat healthy. But at the end of the day, my body mass is my body mass. But when I was a young child, my parents were trying to, steer me towards a healthy path. That's not always the case. It doesn't happen. And we're seeing what I would argue, obesity in this country, though, Anne, is as serious as it is anywhere on the planet. And for whatever reason, we're not taking obesity seriously.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that too, because from the one perspective, you have that image that, as you said, model-like body that social media promotes for people to follow. But on the other hand, we have the food industry that is actually designed to get people addicted to it. I've heard that there are research institutions that you actually can, as a food producer, send a recipe to, and they're gonna work on coming up with perfect combination of sweet, sour, and something else to get people wanting more and more of that. So we have addictive foods on the market that actually act similar to drugs. And from the other hand, we have this image of perfect body shape that is encouraged for people to follow. And that's very difficult to do in the unhealthy climate like we're living in now.
No, you're absolutely correct. Folks, if you're just joining us right now, it's 6:20 here on the East Coast. Joining me here live in the first half of tonight's great double main event. She is the author of Discovery of Recovery, folks, a wonderful book you can purchase on Amazon. She is also a psychiatric RN, and she joins us from beautiful Miami tonight here, folks. It's Ann Real on Real Talk via Jersey First. And staying on the obesity problem, and I think you hit a great point about the way that food is processed, the way that we eat is certainly not healthy. The idea that, healthy food is more expensive. If you want to go shopping at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, I mean, you might have to donate a kidney if you want to go food shopping there sometimes because it's that expensive. But sure enough, if you need a quick snack, you can go to McDonald's for the dollar menu and eat very unhealthy. And that is just something that's sort of been ingrained in American society, I would argue, for decades now, which again leads to the fact that Americans arguably are perhaps the most obese of any country, not just in North America, but on the planet. And it's really alarming.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And my personal experience with eating disorder was a lot about coming back to actually eating the most natural way possible, avoiding all of those processed food items that are not good for my body. And many people, in my experience, are using it not to nourish their body, but just as a mind-altering substance because they're sad, they want to cheer up themselves, so they eat something, or they're happy and they want to celebrate with something to eat. Again, this is using food as a mind-altering substance, as a reward, but we forget that food is there to nurture our body, and that's the reason we're eating. And I think that's also something in the culture of America and in many other countries in the world. That's something to be bring to light, that whole problem. So thank you so much for pointing it out.
No, absolutely. And again, but it's interesting when you bring up about mind stimulating or mind numbing. I mean, listen, this past weekend I was trying to be good, but man, I saw some desserts out there, and oh my God, I was like, you know what? I'm trying to make sure that my jacket can, close. It's a little difficult these days. Weather's getting warmer. You want to be outside, at least up here in New Jersey, where you're in Miami. It's beautiful all year. Right now, it's getting back, it's getting into the 50s, right? It's 60s. It's spring in New York. We want to be outside. We want to be eating. We want to be drinking. But as we all know, that's certainly not the healthiest course for adults, especially as we're getting older, right?
Yes, definitely. But when it comes to addiction, it's just being aware that are we using that food or drinking to run away from where we are in our life? Because if we cannot celebrate an occasion and enjoy time with our loved ones without food and drinking, then there must be something wrong in our relationship. Or if we cannot enjoy the day out, just being in nature, looking at the sun and doing some activities that we love without drinking and eating, then there must be something, for us to work on our hobbies, or why we cannot enjoy the day outside without those things. So these are the questions to ask ourselves. So the answer lies in an intention, not in the action itself. Why am I doing this action? Am I just enjoying it, or am I doing it because I cannot enjoy the moment without it? And I think by answering the question, we get to the core of the problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another great part of your book here, and again, folks, if you have not bought it, again, Discovery of Recovery on Amazon, great book. Definitely, I suggest you you purchase this. Again, and when I get to meet you, I definitely want an autograph on the book.
I would love to.
Promise? You promise an autograph?
Of course. Yes.
All right. Now, again, getting back to the book here, looking at page 105, something that really stood out for me as I was reading this, again, you referred to what's called positivity boosters, supplemental tools to overcome negative thinking, which you talk about. Tool 1 is gratitude. You talk about whether it's morning gratitude practice, giving thanks generously, see the good and the bad, an evening list of daily blessings. You also talk about positive affirmations. Let me just talk about a little bit about gratitude, because that really stood out for me as I was reading your book. I'm one of these people, again, I don't want to get ultra religious on people. People know I'm not the most religious person. I'm very spiritual, but I wake up every morning very grateful. I'm grateful for my health, especially over these last 2 years, dealing with everything with COVID, losing classmates, friends of mine losing family members, losing neighbors, losing people we know. Again, has just made me sort of reevaluate gratitude and be grateful every day to be alive, because again, of what we went through the last 2 years. Maybe not in Florida, because there's a great governor down there in Florida that knows how to handle COVID. Governors up here in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania that handled COVID poorly. I mean, that's just the facts. But the point is that I wake up every day very grateful. I go to bed very grateful. But that really stood out for me in the book about sort of having a process, waking up, having a list, in your mind, being grateful in the morning, proceeding during the day, even in the worst of situations, seeing the good in every single dynamic or behavior or daily occurrence. Take us through as you were writing this chapter and you were writing these things down. What stood out for you? Like, what works for you when you examine your own gratitude and how you express it?
It's a great question. Thank you so much. As a person who is in recovery for many years, I'm very grateful because my life in addiction was obviously very challenging. And every day of the 7 years, I feel like I've been given a brand new life, a fresh start. And I think many recovering people relate to that because I grew up in certain life circumstances that were damaging for my psyche. And the fact that I have the life I'm living now, even if it's a completely normal, regular day, is just a miracle. So that's very easy for me to be grateful for that. But obviously, in recovery, I like saying that to my clients, we have to reprogram our mind. It's like, imagine the mind being a smartphone, and in addiction, it's been programmed in a very negative, self-destructive way. So in recovery, we have to erase that negative programming and put the new programming, which is positive. So that's where all of these rituals come into place, starting the day with gratitude, journaling, because we have to put like the program all over and over again, the new habits to create that new programming that will work automatically eventually. But obviously it takes a lot of time to do it when we just start. My personal is definitely praying and meditating in the morning, and I pray in my own words. Definitely yoga, definitely 12-step meetings, support groups. I stay connected with my recovery people where we together work on just facing life challenges together as sober individuals. Working with others helps, and just breath work. Breath work is another very big part of my work.
Now, Anne, let me ask you this, because dealing with as many individuals as you have, right? You've been helping so many people in their own recovery, and again, dealing with your own process and then seeing it in others. I mean, let's sort of separate fact from fiction, because again, as we get older, and for adults that are still struggling to find sobriety, there's this rationalization that exists. Well, I can go out and have a couple of drinks and I could be okay. Let me, no, you know what, Fernando, do me a favor, cut me off after X amount of drinks, or like, don't give me another shot, or just say, you know what, we're done. We're leaving the bar, or the restaurant, or the club, or the lounge. Is that realistic? Like, can that really work? Or is
No.
it just being completely sober, stopping drinking, stopping smoking, stopping any substance abuse? What's realistic?
In my experience and in my my work and personal experience, it's not realistic. Actually, one of the core problems that leads people to relapse is what I call excessive self-reliance. And those justification patterns that you hear is actually there because this disease affects the part of the brain that is responsible for decision making, right? It's like heart damages heart, addiction damages brain. So people lose the ability to make sound decisions and think logically when it comes to their drug of choice. And instead of realizing those justifications that you said as just a symptom of this disease, because their logic is deeply impaired, they cannot see the truth. If you have your decision-making capacity, you would think, okay, I've been trying to drink one drink for 5,000 times for the last 10 years. And I've been always failing to do it. I always end up drunk and I always face negative consequences. But somehow now in the moment, I think that I can do it out of nowhere. And that's ridiculous, but that's impaired logic that's been affected by the disease of addiction. And that's very important to understand for recovering individuals, that excessive self-reliance is a sure way to relapse. They need a lot of help. They need a lot of support, because alone, unfortunately, with impaired judgment and impaired logic, there is only a little bit a person can do to stay sober.
And one of the things that, again, and whether it was working in the criminal justice system, talking to people, let's say that were incarcerated or on probation or awaiting legal representation, let's say who were struggling with substance abuse of different kinds, or even, let's say, friends of mine, I can tell you many young adults that I talk to say, hey, we've known you forever. You've been partying with us, going to Vegas, going to Miami, you've been doing this for years with us. Somehow you know when to stop. Somehow, yeah, you like to drink and you might get drunk occasionally. Not as much anymore because the recovery is awful. I mean, once you hit 40, and my God, a hangover can last 2 days. But, in your 20s and 30s, you feel like you can drink, whatever. The point is that when I'm talking to other adults in my age demographic, I always get sort of the same look. Like, I don't know how you do it. You don't drink a lot, but, you know when to stop. You seem to have this perspective of like, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to keep going. And I wish I had that. And I feel really bad when I have those conversations with other adults, because it's almost like, well, wait a minute, like that doesn't make me better than them. It doesn't make me superior. Of course not. It just seems that maybe I'm just lucky. Maybe I'm just fortunate that chemically I don't have a dependency while others do. And we have to sort of focus on the fact that we're all different. Our body chemistry is very different amongst each other, men and women, different sizes, different ages, different, BMI, body mass index. I always find it fascinating when I talk to, again, fellow adults in my age demographic that say, Fernando, I don't get it, man. Like, God bless you. You must have something special or unique. And my answer is like, I don't think so. I think I'm just fortunate that chemically I'm not predisposed to that when others are. Is that a realistic way to look at it?
Yes, there's a lot of discussions about the disease of addiction and what affects it. Is it genetics, or if it's environment? There's also the science called epigenetics that studies how genes and environments interact. And there's so many different opinions. But honestly, looking at my experience and the people I worked with, I can say that definitely there's both components, because I see it running in families, but also most of the people I interview on admission have very harsh life circumstances they faced, especially as kids, that obviously damages the psyche. People don't talk much about those type of damages, but we see war now, right, all the time when we watch TV, and the childhood abuse affects the psyche of a child just in the same way as we see Russia bombing Ukrainian cities. That's how childhood psyche can be affected by psychological, like physical and sexual abuse. And then, of course, that's going to create that pattern that a person will be relying on substances to just handle a day, to just not feel all of those horrible emotions that they are feeling. And then it becomes this big pattern that lasts for a very long time and very difficult to break. So yeah, definitely there's many factors that can cause it. And I'm very happy to hear you are not one of those people who struggle with this issue. Yeah, it's very individual.
Yeah, it's very, again, it's one of those things that's just very it's tragic to hear. And your story is so inspiring. I know that you have been through this process for a very, very long time. And certainly, folks, again, as we're about to wrap up here, please check out Discovery of Recovery on Amazon. It is very affordable. It's a great read for anyone out there that is struggling with recovery, that is trying to reach sobriety. Check out Ann Reel's book. It's a great read. Again, I'm almost done with it, and I just started it last week when I had it delivered there. So And hopefully I'll be seeing you soon in Miami. I want to get my copy autographed, and we'll have to do that sometime over dinner when I visit the Sunshine State, and we'll be able to talk. So again, I want to thank you for your time. You've been very illuminating and informative tonight. I'll give you the last word here.
Okay, so guys, I wanted to say, stay sober. Don't use mind-altering substances to alter how you feel. Let those negative feelings motivate you toward change and toward working on the problem that creates those negative feelings. Be honest, be sober, and be real.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, she is the author of Discovery of Recovery. It's on Amazon. Check her out. She's also a very accomplished psychiatric RN in the great state, well, actually the freedom-loving state of Florida, as I like to refer to it, down there in Miami. I'll see you soon, Ann, and thank you so much for joining us here on Real Talk, and we'll talk again soon here on Jersey First.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a good one. All right, folks, there again, Ann Real, an amazing author. Certainly, I hope that you can definitely check out her book. It is quite a read. It is something that, for anyone struggling with sobriety, anyone, struggling with addiction, whether it be eating disorders, substance abuse, even gambling, folks, that is something that, it is definitely worth a read. Very affordable. And again, a great, great author that you definitely want to read up on. And certainly I want to thank her for her time